You want to know the latest about your Denver Broncos? It's why you watch Orange and Blue today. It's why you enjoy canned rock music and the commentary, the nasally drone of yours truly, Cecil Lammey, the expert analysis of him, Andrew Mason. I am Cecil Lammey, and we are here to talk about Lil Jordan Humphrey, I guess. The latest Broncos news is that they have a receiver who's not so lil and, well, really not so fast or anything, but he did play with the Saints. So there you go.
Yeah, you know what? The way I kind of framed it is, hey, the Broncos add an ex-Saints receiver, but it's probably not the one that some people are hoping for, because I think there's a little bit of hope that Michael Thomas ends up as a Saints cap casualty and could be in the mix, and we can debate the pluses and minuses of adding someone like him who's got a long injury history. But yeah, Lil Jordan Humphrey, the thing that first went through my mind is he had the slowest 40 time of any receiver at the combine 4 years ago. And he's 6'4", he's 210, he's a rotational guy. I'll tell you what, though, I think the most interesting thing here is if you're trying to kind of fill out a wide receiver depth chart, does this mean that here's your big receiver that you're going to have on the roster perhaps, and that something is in play for trading Courtland Sutton? That's the question.
Yes. Yeah, and Dom chimes in on the chat room. What's up, Dom? And he's like, hey, he's down to trade Courtland Sutton. And there seem to be a lot of fans like that. Here's my word of caution. You're not going to get much for Courtland Sutton. So, yes, fans down to trade Courtland, and he doesn't look the same. That's fine. You're going to get like a 6th-round pick.
Yeah, I think 5th round is probably the best case scenario. Maybe it might be one of those deals, Cease, where if you want the best possible pick, maybe it's got to be a conditional thing, right? You might be looking at a deal where, because you want to get some capital for this year, just because you're lacking in capital. We know that George Payton wants that. It might well be a 6th rounder this year, and then a conditional pick for 2024 that could range from, say, a 5th to a 7th based on the production. That's the kind of thing you're looking at. He's not a replacement for Courtland Sutton, but I do think that this is making sure that you've got another big body in there when you're practicing. At minimum, that's what this is. And somebody who knows what Sean Payton is doing and knows what Sean Payton is about, because he played 3 years with New Orleans, practice squad, some on the 53, end up actually starting, I think, 6 games, most of which were in 2021, Sean Payton's last season there. So clearly this is also somebody that Sean Payton thinks pretty highly of to bring in at this point.
Yeah, and he can play a little bit of special teams. I mean,
not much.
That's what he's played. Was it, 40% of offense last year? I'm looking at the Patriots stats, and then I think it was like 17% of special teams.
Yeah, he actually in 3 years with New Orleans, he played 334 snaps on offense, but only 52 on special teams. So he's not really a core special teamer. He'll get some snaps, but you're not talking about this guy the way you would be talking about say Cody Latimer a few years ago, being a backup receiver who's a core player on teams. That's not really the case with Lil Jordan Humphrey.
Yeah, he made a great gunner. Cody Latimer having success in the XFL. Love seeing it. I'm Facebook friends with Cody.
Paxton Lynch, his favorite target, although they brought in some quarterback competition this week with my guy Quentin Flowers, former Tampa Bay Vipers quarterback,
USF,
most importantly, former USF quarterback, the greatest quarterback in USF history. Apologies to BJ Daniels and Matt Grothe, but it's Quentin Flowers. So it's funny, like they signed him, and I'm like, I think I just became an Orlando Guardians fan, even though they're
Where's
only
your hat? Right. Where's your hat at? And I think they tried making him a running back, if memory serves. I can't remember if someone.
The Tampa Bay Vipers. Yeah, Mark Trestman was coaching the Tampa Bay Vipers back in 2020 before the season was cut short due to COVID. And he's a pro style guy, and he had no clue what to do with a guy like Quentin Flowers. To me, in that sort of league as well, you don't need a pro style offense. What you need in that level of the league, frankly, is chaos to win. And Quentin Flowers is a chaos quarterback.
Yeah. Okay. From the XFL back to the National Football League and the Denver Broncos and the Draymond Jones things, it changed. It changed at the combine, and I think it changed because the Broncos became aware of what the market would be for Draymond, and most importantly, Draymond became aware of what the market would be. Today was the deadline for franchise tag players. You've got the Lamar Jackson thing we could talk about, but let's focus on Draymond Jones and why now he'll hit the open market. And Mace, I really believe that means he's gone.
Yeah, the open market rarely means that you come back when you're a player of Draymond's caliber. That's the thing. And it's one of those deals that there's clearly a line in the sand negotiation-wise on the Broncos, and they don't want to cross it. The question then, it's like you say, okay, well, why not just do a tag and trade? There are a couple of things in play on that. Number one, if you do a tag and trade, that means he's chewing up nearly $20 million of your cap right away. And that means that's money that you can't spend. Number two, you do get a third-round comp pick back if he walks, but that is if you do not sign a comparable unrestricted free agent, because then that would cancel out. But here's where it gets interesting. You trade for a player or you sign a player who was cut, that doesn't count towards the compensatory calculus. And that's one of the reasons why when Eric Kendricks got cut by the Vikings yesterday, and I wrote my Inside Linebackers piece at denversports.com, I mentioned him as a possibility, not only the connection with George Payton, but a player like Kendricks who is cut, you could bring him in, and that would not cancel out the third-round comp pick you would get if Draymond Jones walks. And that third-round comp pick would be at the end of the third round next year. And so yes. I think that's something to look for, I think, as the Broncos go through their acquisitions is, do we see it focused more on trades and players who aren't UFAs, at least not high-level UFAs, but instead are street free agents because they were cut, and thus they don't count towards compensatory calculus because Peyton seems like he still wants to ramp up the number of picks the Broncos have in the future.
Yeah, and if Sutton is traded, as the chat room is talking about that, maybe it's traded for a player. If that doesn't count against the compensatory calculation, then we're thinking picks like, oh man, all they get is a fifth. Maybe that's a player they would get instead.
And maybe it's an exchange of contracts that the teams don't want, perhaps. And maybe there's some, if the players aren't balanced, maybe there's some exchange of draft picks. Like, let's give one. Okay. Let's live in the dream world of DeAndre Hopkins, right?
Okay.
I don't think this is happening, but let's live in that dream world. DeAndre Hopkins for Courtland Sutton. If you made a deal like that, odds are you would be looking at, say, I think when my dogs just came in, oh, hi, Charlotte. You'd be looking at maybe like a 4th round pick going to the Cardinals and a 6th round pick coming back. That sort of trade where you walk out with the same number of picks as you had at the beginning, but you trade down. And George Payton likes those trades.
Yeah, George Payton does like those trades.
You wanna be on the mic, Charlotte?
Yeah.
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 That's awesome.
She's currently playing the role of our puppies because she's on the dog mat right now below my desk. But
okay. There you have it.
Good to see you, Charlotte.
All right. Goodbye.
They grow up fast, man. They grow up fast. I remember when she was like a little girl running around Broncos camp.
I know. And now, I mean, we just went to a Universal and Disney World last month, and there was not a single ride that she couldn't get on. That's how tall she's gotten. So,
okay.
Anyway,
there you go.
All right. So, what was that question that just popped up there?
About Zach Allen? Yeah. About why not go Zach Allen from Arizona with familiarity with Vance Joseph. And Vance Joseph's job just got a lot tougher. If Draymond Jones is not back. Like, sorry, VJ. And, VJ is going to have to look good, or else people are going to start rumbling early because everyone, believes so much in that Broncos defense. Broncos defense without Chubb, without Draymond Jones, that's going to put a lot more pressure on VJ to create pressure somehow.
No doubt. I mean, honestly, like there was a wild theory that went through my mind that I don't think is true. But what if this year is strictly about, let's see if we can get Russ right, and otherwise let's reset things a bit. And what I mean by that is maybe you're letting Draymond Jones walk, but you're saying, okay, we're going to play the young guys, right? And you don't have a big ticket, even a street free agent or a trade that you don't have a big ticket coming in. And this year is about just, okay, let's figure it out with Russ. But if not, then we're in good draft position. And Nate Albert says, I think Russ on a 1-year lease. There was that, I wouldn't call it a report. And Matthew Berry very specifically said it was just that I'm not a journalist. It's, this is the gossip around Indianapolis.
Yes.
But I don't buy into the stuff that Sean Payton doesn't like Russell Wilson. I don't buy into that for a second.
No.
What I do buy into, though, and this is organization wide, is the notion that it really is 1 year for Russ to prove himself, and that if he can't, then it becomes about, okay, what position can you put yourself in to find the quarterback of the future and have things planned out, knowing that if Russ doesn't get turned around this year, you're going to carry a pretty big dead money figure for the next 2 years. The thing that you'd be doing is getting out of the $37.5 million that would kick in, $37 million that would kick in on the 5th day of the league year. That's his 2025 salary guaranteed if he's on the roster 5th day of the 2024 league year. That's what's in play. It would be one of those things where it'd be painful, but you'd be kind of making some plans. And part of the contingency plans may be you don't spend your cap limit this year, so you can have cap carryover to help ease the burden of the dead money you'd be taking on. And so that's the crazy theory that I have, and I want
that's maybe not so crazy. I did want to message Matthew and say, because I know where he got some of that information and it's unreliable. And he did say in the 23 things he learned at the combine, which was like, my nipples are hard for Alan Lazard. When that was the lead, I was like, okay, Matthew, you got me. And I read the Broncos stuff and I did some checking. I was like, oh, I know who he talked to, and that's unreliable. So I need to message Matthew about that.
The one thing that was reliable, I thought, was the Javonte Williams stuff.
Yeah, the Javonte Williams stuff was good.
That meshes with everything I've heard. And you and I have talked about this, and it's the nature of the injury, right? Right. The multi-ligament nature of the injury means there's a decent chance he's not ready for the start of the season. And there's a decent chance he's never 100% of what he was again. And so you're just, and so, I salute, I salute the Broncos for being optimistic in terms of their public pronouncements. George Payton sounded very optimistic last week about Javonte Williams, but you can be optimistic and say, we got to make sure we have our contingency plans in line.
Yes,
that is 100% true.
What that was reported was true. I just feel bad for Javonte because I think George put him in a bad spot.
Yeah.
Because you could have said, hey, we feel he's the best in the league when he's healthy. We'll do everything we can to get him healthy. I'm not going to put a day on it, but just know that Javonte is our guy and we love him. And, we're going to add talent to the room, but Javonte is such a big part of what we do. There's so many ways you can answer that without ever saying week one as a possibility. Yeah. I go back to the Russell Wilson thing and just kind of the idea of them saving that for next year and resetting Russ if they can. That does make sense. I'm not necessarily comfortable with it. And my other problem is this, Mace. George Payton might be setting up draft picks for someone who's not him. So he might be doing these deals and he's trying to, and then we're going to comp pick in 2024. George, you might not be here in 2024. So I get it, reset Russ, kind of wait and see, maybe don't spend all your cap, have carryover in 2024. You make the big run and maybe you got a new quarterback or whatever. I get all that. That makes sense to a certain degree. But then there's part of me that goes, George Payton is setting up the next guy who may not be him. Because if they don't win this year, all of ththese moves have been done from George Payton. Mostly. There's still some Elway holdover, but he did the move for Hackett. He did the move for Wilson. He, did not get Draymond Jones signed. These are all George Payton decisions. And the Piper will need to be paid. Did I say that right? Anyway.
Yeah. Pay the Piper. The Piper will need to be paid. Yeah, that's exactly right. You got it.
Yeah.
The funny thing is though, with Draymond Jones, that's not just on George Payton. That's on Sean Payton. Sean Payton really wanted Draymond Jones. He could say to George Payton, look, let's just get this done. Don't care if it's $20 million.
Yep.
Just get this done, right? So I mean, it's fascinating that that notion. I would think the fair thing would be if George Payton is molding things. And by the way, thank you, DCID Rummer, for the kind words. Appreciate them, and I love hearing from you. If George Payton is kind of doing what Sean Payton wants here, to me, I'd say, okay, that's the guy I'm going to keep around if I'm Sean Payton. I want to work with him. And I will say this. I don't want to put too much on just seeing something visually without like hearing anything. But when I was at the workouts Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and I was looking up in the Broncos booth, I was sitting, they were on one side, I was on the other. And it looked to me like George Payton and Sean Payton were talking an awful lot, and they were communicating together. So I don't think that is actually one thing. And then just kind of digging around in Indianapolis, I don't think George Payton has to fear for his job right now. And if things struggle in part because of moves that were made with a look toward the future and not this year, I think George Payton might well be back. I mean, we could be in a scenario, Cease, where we're looking at the end of this year and the Broncos had a frustrating season and maybe Sean Payton couldn't get Russell Wilson back. But, oh man, despite not having a draft pick until the third round, they got three starters. And if that's the case, I find it hard to push the eject button on George Payton.
Which would you prefer? I feel like we're doing morning radio. It's Ass Crack and Ballsack AM in the AM. That's always my name. Okay. Would you rather?
I'm Marty KBBL.
Weather, sports, weather. Tune in for weather, traffic on the 10s. Would you rather have them like, okay, do that theory of like, okay, let's see if we can fix Russ, and then kind of wait on everything else, put everything else on hold, play the young guys, draft well, whatever. Mm-hmm. Or would you rather, and this is where I come in, I would like Sean Payton to go to George Payton and be like, see what you got. Let's see what you got. Make it clear to him. Like, if I'm not happy with this draft, if I'm not happy with the results this year, you're gone. Mm-hmm. And I like that sort of pressure. I feel George Payton could respond to that sort of pressure. I personally don't like pushing things off. Also, we have the 7 years of struggle, 6 years of misery in Broncos country. So again, morning radio show right before traffic on the 10s. Andrew Mason, would you rather kind of push things back or put the pressure on a lot now?
I'd push things back because part of it is looking at the landscape. What's the best outcome for this season if everything breaks exactly right?
Wild card round and maybe a surprise win in the playoffs. Like one win. I think their maximum is one win in the playoffs. That's the maximum output.
Yeah, and I feel kind of the same way. I think to myself, the best case scenario for this season is getting in the divisional round, right? And if that's the case, and that's the best you're going to do kind of in this short-term window, because you look around and you see, even though Kansas City, they didn't franchise Orlando Brown, the Chiefs aren't going anywhere. And the Chiefs have actually shown the last couple of years a nice ability to draft and develop offensive linemen. So I think that's going to continue. Jacksonville is only going to get better. I think the Chargers are going to be better with Kellen Moore guiding the offense, with all respect to Joe Lombardi, who's now here in Denver.
Right.
The Bills are kind of interesting, but I think the Dolphins will get better. I think the Bills, once they plug Von Miller back in, I think they should be better, even though it looks like
once they get Dalvin Cook.
Yeah.
So they have the Cook brothers. They'll be awesome.
And of course you have the Bengals in play as well. The point being, going all in for this year just seems to be an imprudent strategy. And that's why I would kind of be thinking long haul. And that's another thing. I don't want if you tell George Payton, hey, show me what you got this year, I don't want him making draft choices based entirely on what the outcome is for them as rookies. Okay.
I
I
will
want
also
him make.
counter that, Mace, and I don't like to interrupt you, but I will here in this occasion.
Well, I was pontificating, so that's okay.
Okay, well, I would like to counter that and say I would like to, because he and even the chat room saying it, and I'll pull up who said it in the chat room, but he's like making picks of this luxury of like he's got time. He's making picks as if he's Rick Spielman, and I'm like, sorry, Minnesota didn't win anything, and I love Rick Spielman, but like I would rather see George Payton with some heat on, and like make those picks, get those impact guys, and then you're not thinking of like in developing him, and then 3 years from now he's something. Like you don't have 3 years, bro. So I would honestly like to see that flame turned up.
But I would also say that in 2 drafts, Pat Surtain, Javonte Williams, Quinn Miners, Baron Browning, Damari Mathis, Greg Dulcich. I'm looking at those first 4 rounds of the drafts, and he's finding some, at minimum, solid starters. Jury's very much out on Greg Dulcich. Can he stay healthy? But those other guys, I think, are players. And so like Baron Browning, for example, took a year for him to kind of figure out what he was positionally.
And they kept moving him around.
Yeah. And so that's the thing. Like, I don't want him to look at picks 67 and 68 and say, okay, who's the best right now? I want him to look at the player and say, okay, who can be the best player long term? And if you put that 1-year thing on him, I think maybe you end up with a different pick. Now, that being said, maybe you hit on the guy who's the Venn diagram, who's best now and best long term, Keanu Benton, right? I mean,
gonna start driving that train, man.
Hey, look, Draymond's almost certainly out the door. They need somebody who can start right now and help you right now. And I think Benton can step in and be a plus player for you right now while he refines his pass rush game to become a little more effective. I mean, he's a different type of player than Draymond because he's a bigger player. He's 309, but
he's played big boy football. I don't mind having to sharpen those pass rushing skills because he's got the quickness off the line and the ferocity that you need.
Give me Benton in the 3rd, Dante Stills in the 4th.
Done. Hey, done.
Okay.
Done.
But then the problem is we haven't worked on the offensive line. And that's another thing about and that's another thing about why I don't think you can go all in on this year and why I think it's best to kind of have the long range view. Because, man, and I know it's frustrating because Edward Wright, you comment, fans deserve competent drafting and free agents. The time clock is ticking on Peyton and Wilson. I get why the clock is ticking. Like, I get what y'all are feeling because these last 6 seasons have been crap football. All right.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that. You don't want to watch it. I don't want to watch it. But at the same time, what is the bet when you look at like what things are this year? If you went all in for this year, what's the best possible outcome? And I don't think it justifies kind of saying everything's all in for this year. You probably need to be a bit more patient. And I think Sean Payton may be looking around the landscape and realizing this is not the NFC South of 06. When he walked into New Orleans, yeah, they were 3-13. But, quick tour around the division. You had Jake Delhomme and in Carolina, good team, but Carolina kind of tend to go hot and cold, right? They'd be kind of on 1 year off the next when John Fox and Jake Delhomme were there. Tampa Bay, I believe, had Chris Sims, and then he had that horrific injury early in that season where he nearly died, literally.
Mm-hmm.
And then Atlanta had Michael Vick. So not that Delhomme was a good quarterback. Vick was a athletically gifted quarterback who could be inconsistent, but you didn't look around and say, like you look here at the AFC West and see defending champs, Chiefs, Chargers, playoff team last year, Justin Herbert, top 5, top 6 quarterback. The challenge is different, and it may require a different approach from Sean Payton than he was able to take in New Orleans.
David is here in the chat room, and I will say this. Someone asked me on Twitter, like, did George Payton piss in your Cheerios? And 1, I was like, how do you know I eat Cheerios for breakfast? And then 2, I was like, I don't want to be the guy that rags on George Payton. And David asks, is George smart enough? I don't think it's a matter of intelligence. I think it's a matter
very
of
smart.
Finding the right fit and not being paralyzed by either what others are telling you, because I don't care what Russell Wilson says about Montrell Washington, And then paralyzed by like analysis, like over analysis. Like you need playmakers, and he's added some nice players. I love Damari Mathis, but you know what would have been better? Damari Mathis and Tariq Woolen. That would have been better. And that would have been awesome. Then, I mean, you don't even have to worry about corner. You would have incredible corners.
Hey, you know what would have been better? Damari Mathis and Sam Howell.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you'd have a court. Then we wouldn't be talking about, oh, do you got to bring in Jameis Winston back?
Right. Marcus Mariota.
We got our relief option already in the building. We got our contingency plan already there for us. Can't figure it out.
And
right?
look at what Bruce Arians is saying about Kyle Trask. And they will, Jason Light, had said, like, we're going to roll. We're excited about Kyle Trask. We're going to bring in somebody, but Trask is there to compete. That could easily be a Sam Howell at the Broncos, done the deed, if you will. So I will say this on John and Kyle. And John and Kyle, like, go back and forth. This isn't just holding hands and skipping along the beach and being like, we have the 49ers. This is
there are some slam doors and butted heads in that building.
Up heads, but there is a shared vision. So the most important thing, it's not whether George Payton is smart enough. He's plenty smart. It's having that shared vision with Sean Payton. George Payton must do everything possible to get on the same page as Sean Payton, and the faster, the better.
And the other thing that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch had is coming from kind of the same school, because, of course, Kyle, Mike Shanahan's son, and then coached under John Gruden with Tampa Bay. That's how he got his start. I think he missed John Lynch by a year, but then, of course, while Kyle Shanahan, after, growing up with Mike Shanahan and then eventually coaching with him, while Kyle Shanahan's doing that, John Lynch is playing under Mike Shanahan, right? And it's one of those things where there was just the 1 degree of separation, and they came together. When they worked together in San Francisco for the first time, this wasn't two people who didn't know each other. This was two people, even though they'd never worked together, they came from the same orchard, as it were, and they took different paths, but they came from the same philosophical orchard, as it were. And so it's easy that they had a shared vision. The other name that I would throw in there, as well as part of the connective tissue, is Rich McKay, the president of the Falcons, who was the general manager of the Buccaneers for a long time, and was drafted John Lynch, and then had Kyle Shanahan as his offensive coordinator. I mean, this is a sport of relationships, right?
Yes.
But the point being, Kyle and John developed over many, many years to being ready to work together and have their vision on the same page. And there isn't that same level of connection for Sean Payton and George Payton. Now it's not to say they can't develop it working together, but they be coming from a different spot because they come from different trees of influence, right? I mean, Sean Payton, even though he's worked for different coaches, Sean Payton at his core is mostly a Bill Parcells guy. That's where he comes from. That's what defines him. With George Payton, it's a lot of Rick Spielman, right?
Yeah, a lot of Rick Spielman, and Mike Zimmer was there for a lot of that.
Yeah.
So there we
Although
go.
Mike Zimmer's a Parcells guy.
Yeah. So again, relationships.
So who knows? Maybe they find some common ground with Peyton having kind of an indirect Parcells influence. So anyway, Nate Albert says Sean Payton and George Payton are more like stepbrothers.
Yep.
Oh, man.
Did we just become best friends? Yeah, I hope that's the way it is. Yeah, you're not gonna not get Randy Jackson's autograph on your samurai sword.
Or is it like the other, not the Step Brothers movie, but the other thing I think about is Tommy Boy, right? Brothers don't shake hands. Brothers gotta hug.
La la la, Luke. I am your father.
La la lo.
You can put 6 packs of beer soda. Don't get me started on Tommy Boy references.
Just don't put the M&Ms on the dashboard. That's really going to help the resale value.
And where do you get the vacuum cleaner to vacuum the moths? Like that part always weirded me out. Anyway,
yeah.
Fat guy in a little coat. He is Andrew Mason. I am Cecil Lammey. We appreciate you all. I was just gonna say I want Adam Peters in Denver again, but anyway, because there's a third San Francisco asset. It's Adam Peters. Like Adam does great work for Kyle and John. But anyway, that is a wrap.
I'm afraid.
I know.
It's more look if they move on from George Payton at some point, it's more likely gonna be Ryan Pace.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
but I don't think that's imminent. I think George is going to get a fair shot.
Okay.
I do.
Okay. We will see about that. I tend to be a little more hot seat. I'm
more pro George Payton than you are. That's okay. Yeah. I think I'm probably the most George Payton person at the station, but is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, as long as we talk logically, right? That's the whole point of it. Like, and I like the philosophical disagreement that we've had today because it's cool. That's what sports talk is about. Mm-hmm. Sports talk isn't stupid hot takes and like not having knowledge of situations. Sports talk is about history and relevance and communication and philosophy and what do you want? And that's why I think this opposition is one natural, but two also like really, really interesting. Because like, what do you want? Do you want hot seat? Everyone win now or get the hell out? Or do you want like, hey, let's be patient. Let's give it some time. And let's see what we can do, going forward. So
patience is probably, patience is probably the right way. The problem is Broncos country is understandably impatient. Mm-hmm. Completely get that.
Yep.
Completely get that. And but that's why maybe the best kind of season is one that even though I know people would say, okay, you're better off tanking, get a high draft pick, blah, blah, blah. The best kind of season might be one where Sean Payton ekes out a 9-8 season, but you didn't overspend. You accumulated resources.
Young guys got experience.
Right. You put yourself in position to maybe make that big move next year, even if it means moving on from Russell Wilson, make that big move for a quarterback. Very much like Buffalo did in 2017, where they went 9-7 and that got a good taste in everybody's mouth, but they didn't deviate from their rebuilding plan. Of course, I mean, it's almost been successful there, but I still like the way they approached that, in that they didn't get fooled by one good year. And I don't think the Broncos would either, but that's the sort, after when you've had a bunch of bad seasons, that's the sort of season that does feel good for the fans, even though it may not result in anything long-term. I get
you can start the Tyrod Taylors and the Alex Smiths for eternity.
Yeah.
Or you can make that move and go for it. So
well, we know Sean Payton loves him some Caleb Williams.
Yes, he does.
He's on the record saying this. So that part at that, and in terms of what Sean Payton wants deep in his gut, part is true. He's on the record saying how much he likes Caleb Williams, how he thinks he's bad. I don't think he used the word generational, but he kind of implied it. So
yeah. And when we see it, we know it. And we'll talk about it right here. Orange and Blue today is Andrew Mason. Follow him on Twitter at Mace Denver. I am at Cecil Lammey saying, be safe, be kind, know that you are appreciated. Stay tuned. And as always, my friends, stay frosty. Why did my voice crack?